The scream tore through the 40th floor of Nexus Dynamics before anyone understood why. Maya Brooks stood frozen under the harsh conference room lights. Her own project, 3 years of 18-hour days, of code she'd written line by line, of a system she'd built from nothing, glowing on a screen the size of a wall, while Kaori Ishikawa pointed a manicured finger directly at her chest. "This," Kaori announced to nearly 500 employees packed into the auditorium, "is proof of theft." Maya's mouth went dry. "That's my project. I built that. I built that." "Security," Kaori said, not even raising her voice, as if she were ordering lunch. 2 guards moved toward Maya before she could process what was happening. Phones rose all around the room, dozens of them, red recording lights blinking like a swarm of tiny eyes. "Wait, this is insane. You can't do this." Maya's voice cracked as a guard's hand closed around her arm. Somewhere in the crowd, a voice muttered just loud enough to carry. "Foreigners never belong at the top anyway." Laughter, actual laughter, rippling through the auditorium like poison through water. Maya stopped fighting the guards. She let them walk her out, spine straight, chin up, because if she was going to fall apart, she refused to do it in front of 500 people who'd already decided she was nothing. Before we go any further, if you want to see exactly how far this goes, hit subscribe right now, drop a comment telling me you're watching, and smash that like button, because trust me, this story is about to escalate in ways you will not see coming. 3 years. That's how long Maya had poured herself into Nexus Dynamics, ever since she'd arrived in Tokyo with nothing but a computer science degree, a stubborn work ethic, and a determination to prove that being an outsider didn't mean being less capable. She delivered the company's 3 biggest product launches. She'd trained half the junior engineers herself. Everyone, every single person on that floor, had assumed the director promotion was hers. Everyone except Kaori Ishikawa, who'd handed it to her own nephew the week before, a 26-year-old with 0 relevant experience and a last name that mattered more than his resume. Maya had married Kaito Nakamura 6 months earlier. He was quiet, reserved, the kind of man who listened more than he spoke, who wore simple dark suits and never once bragged about anything, though she sometimes caught glimpses, a driver who never spoke unless spoken to, a respect from strangers on the street that seemed disproportionate to a man who claimed to work in investments. "Call me if you ever need me," he'd told her once, holding her face in his hands after a rough day at work. "Anytime, Maya, I mean it." She'd laughed, kissed him, and told him she could handle her own battles. She always had. She wasn't laughing now. The rain came down in sheets as Maya walked out of the Nexus Dynamics building for what she assumed was the last time, her badge deactivated, her desk contents in a box some intern had hastily thrown together, her career apparently over before lunch. She didn't call a taxi. She just walked, letting the rain soak through her blazer. She finally sat down on a concrete bench outside a shuttered noodle shop, put the box beside her, and let herself shake. Her phone buzzed, then buzzed again. Notifications, messages, someone had already uploaded the video, Nexus Dynamics thief exposed live, and it was spreading. She stared at the screen for a long time before she finally pressed call. Kaito answered on the second ring. "Maya." For a moment she couldn't speak. Her throat had closed around something jagged. "Maya, talk to me. What happened?" Her voice broke. "They destroyed me, Kaito, in front of everyone. Kaori took my project, my work. She said I stole it. She had security drag me out like a criminal, and everyone just..." A sob cut through the sentence. Everyone just laughed. Silence on the other end. Not confused silence, not shocked silence. Something colder, something still. "Where are you right now?" "Outside, in the rain. I don't know what to do." "Maya," his voice was gentle, but underneath it was something she'd never heard from him before, something with an edge like steel wrapped in silk. "Listen to me very carefully. I need you to say the words." She didn't understand what he meant, not fully, not yet. But something in her, some buried, furious, humiliated part of herself, rose up and answered anyway. "Buy the company," she whispered. A pause, rain hammering the pavement around her. "Destroy them," she added, quieter but somehow harder. Another silence. This one felt different, like a door closing somewhere far away and a much bigger one opening. "Go home, Maya," Kaito said finally. "Get warm, eat something, I'll handle the rest." "Kaito, what does that even?" "I love you," he said simply. "Go home." The line went dead. If you're getting chills right now, that's exactly how this is supposed to feel, because what happens next is going to blow your mind. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss a second of it. Back at Nexus Dynamics, Kaori Ishikawa sat in her new corner office. Maya's old Teams project displayed proudly on her monitor, as if she'd built it herself, sipping champagne with two of her closest allies on the board. "Did you see her face?" Kaori laughed, swirling her glass. 3 years of work gone just like that. She actually thought she was going to be director. Please. "The video's already got 200,000 views," one of her allies said, scrolling on his phone. "People are eating it up." "Good," Kaori said. "Let it spread. Let everyone see what happens to people who forget their place." She had no idea that 400 kilometers away, phone calls were already being made that would end her career within 72 hours. The first sign came the next morning at 6 a.m., when the chief financial officer of Nexus Dynamics received an urgent call from their primary banking partner. "Your credit lines have been frozen," the banking representative said flatly. "Effective immediately." "Frozen? On what grounds? We have no defaults now." "I'm not authorized to disclose the reasoning. I'm sorry." By 9 a.m., 3 separate investment firms had liquidated their positions in Nexus Dynamics stock, sending the share price tumbling 11% before the opening bell had even finished ringing. By noon, 2 international partners, companies Nexus Dynamics had spent years courting, sent formal notices canceling multi-million-dollar contracts, citing unforeseen changes in strategic direction, with no further explanation offered. By 3 p.m., 3 board members had abruptly resigned, citing personal reasons, refusing to answer a single follow-up question from a visibly panicked communications team. "What is happening?" Kaori demanded, storming into an emergency meeting, her champagne buzz from the day before replaced entirely by cold sweat. "Somebody explain this to me right now." Nobody could. Nobody understood. It was as if some invisible hand had reached into the company's foundations overnight and begun quietly, methodically, pulling every support beam loose. "There's a meeting request," the CFO said carefully, sliding a folder across the table. "Someone wants an emergency session with the full board, tomorrow morning." "Who?" The CFO checked the name again, as if making sure he'd read it correctly. "A representative named Kaito Nakamura." Kaori frowned. Never heard of him. She would. The boardroom the next morning was tense, silent, thick with the kind of dread that comes before news nobody wants to hear. Executives shifted in their seats. Whispers passed back and forth in hushed Japanese. Then the door opened. Kaito Nakamura walked in wearing a simple charcoal suit, no watch, no visible wealth, nothing that should have commanded a room. And yet the moment he stepped through that door, something extraordinary happened. Every single executive from Japan's largest financial institutions, men who'd flown in that morning, men Kaori had spent years trying to get meetings with, rose to their feet in unison. Several men in black suits, standing along the back wall, bowed, deep and formal, the kind of bow reserved for royalty. The chairman of the board, a man in his 70s who had never shown deference to anyone in his life, leaned toward his vice chairman and whispered a single phrase, his voice trembling slightly. "The dragon has arrived." Kaori's champagne-flushed confidence from 2 days earlier evaporated entirely. Her hands, resting on the table, began to tremble. "Who," she managed, "is this man?" Nobody answered her. Nobody needed to. Kaito took his seat at the head of the table without being invited to do so, and nobody objected. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," he said calmly, his tone almost pleasant, almost gentle, which somehow made it more terrifying. "I'll keep this brief." "What is the meaning of this?" Kaori snapped, trying to reclaim some authority. "Freezing our credit, scaring off our investors, sabotaging our contracts. This is corporate terrorism." Kaito looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time with an expression of total calm. "My holding company," he said, "along with 41 subsidiary firms operating independently across 3 countries, acquired 62% of Nexus Dynamics' outstanding shares over the past 36 hours. The room went dead silent. That's impossible," Kaori stammered. "There's no way our shares are protected, our—" "It was expensive," Kaito said simply, "but not impossible. Nothing about this was impossible." Kaori's face had gone white. "You're saying you own this company." "I'm saying I own this company," Kaito confirmed. "As of 6:14 this morning, controlling interest belongs to me." Kaori shot to her feet, her chair scraping violently against the floor. "This is insane. You cannot just—" "Sit down," Kaito said, and though his voice never rose above a calm, even register, something in it made every person in that room flinch. Kaori sat. "Now," Kaito continued, "let's discuss the reason we're here." He nodded once, and an aide near the door dimmed the lights, activating a screen behind him. Security footage played first. Maya's face on the day her project was stolen, time-stamped weeks before the presentation, showing her alone in her office building the very system Kaori had claimed as her nephew's work. Then came the emails, internal correspondence between Kaori and 2 board allies, explicitly discussing how to remove the American before the promotion cycle, discussing how to reframe her work as theft to justify her termination without severance. Then the financial records, a paper trail showing Kaori had been diverting departmental budget for personal use for over a year, badly hidden behind vague expense categories nobody had bothered to audit. The room stared at the screen in horrified silence. "Kaori Ishikawa," Kaito said, his voice quiet but absolute, "orchestrated a public humiliation of an employee whose only crime was being better at her job than everyone comfortable enough to feel threatened by her." "This is fabricated," Kaori tried, but her voice had lost all its earlier venom, reduced now to a desperate whisper. "It's time-stamped, verified, and admissible," Kaito said. "Effective immediately, Kaori Ishikawa is removed from her position and from this board." "You can't." "Her nephew is terminated as well," Kaito continued, unbothered, "along with every executive who signed off on this decision knowing it was based on lies." One by one, names were read. One by one, faces went pale around that long table. Several executives who had laughed in that auditorium 2 days earlier now sat rigid, sweating, realizing exactly how badly they'd misjudged the situation. Security escorted Kaori from the boardroom the same way she'd once had Maya escorted from the auditorium. Except this time, no one laughed. That evening, Maya sat across from Kaito in their apartment, a mug of tea warming her hands, the weight of the last 72 hours still settling into her bones. "Who are you?" she asked quietly. "Really?" Kaito set down his own cup, exhaling slowly, as if he'd been waiting 3 years for this exact question and dreading it the entire time. "I wanted you to love the man," he said finally, "not the name." "What name?" He didn't answer with words. Instead, he walked to the window and pulled back the curtain. Outside, lining the street below their apartment, more than 30 black luxury vehicles sat in perfect formation, headlights off, drivers standing silently beside each one. As Maya watched, hundreds of men in dark suits emerged from the vehicles and dropped into synchronized, formal bows, facing up toward their window. One voice rose above the silence, clear and resolute. "Boss." Maya's teacup nearly slipped from her fingers. "Kaito," she whispered, "what is this?" He turned to face her, his expression calm, almost apologetic. "I run the largest organization in Tokyo," he said quietly. "The kind that doesn't officially exist on paper, but that everyone in this city knows better than to cross." Maya's voice failed her. You're Yakuza. I'm the head of it, he said simply. Have been since I was 28. Maya sat frozen, processing 3 years, 6 months of marriage, all of it recontextualized in an instant. The quiet respect from strangers. The driver who never asked questions. The calm that never cracked, no matter what crisis arose. Why didn't you tell me? Because the moment people learn who I am, Kaito said, they stop seeing me. They only see what I represent. I didn't want that between us. I wanted you to marry Kaito, not an empire. Maya was quiet for a long moment, staring at the small army bowing silently in the rain outside her window. And now, she finally asked, what happens now? Now, Kaito said, we decide what kind of company Nexus Dynamics becomes. If this twist just changed everything for you, believe me, you are not alone. Make sure you're subscribed and comment below with just one word. Dragon, if you saw this coming. Because what happens next is the ending you've been waiting for. In the weeks that followed, Kaito could have burned Nexus Dynamics to the ground out of pure vengeance. He could have liquidated it, stripped its assets, made an example so severe that no company in Tokyo would ever dare mistreat an employee again out of sheer terror. He didn't. Instead, he sat Maya down in what had once been Kaori's corner office and slid a folder across the desk toward her. I'm not running this company, he said. You are. Maya blinked at him. Me. You built half of what makes this company valuable in the first place, Kaito said. You understand it better than anyone who's ever sat in that chair. I'm nomming you CEO. Kaito, I don't know if I'm ready for something like that. You were ready 3 weeks ago, he said gently. The only thing that changed is that now nobody can take it away from you. Maya accepted the role 2 days later, standing in front of the very same auditorium where she'd once been dragged out by security, addressing employees who weren't sure whether to be terrified of her or grateful. I'm not here for revenge, she told them, her voice steady despite the memory of that room still fresh in her chest. I'm here to build something different. Starting today, every promotion decision goes through a transparent review board. Every performance evaluation will be documented, verified, and open to appeal. We're implementing formal diversity hearing initiatives and employee protection policies that actually mean something, not just words on a company handbook nobody reads. The applause that followed wasn't polite or obligatory. It was real. Months passed. Nexus Dynamics transformed from the inside out, not through fear, but through actual structural change. Innovation flourished under leadership that finally rewarded merit instead of connections. Talented employees who'd once been overlooked began rising through the ranks. The toxic culture that had once protected people like Kaori simply had nowhere left to hide. Kaori Ishikawa, meanwhile, found herself unemployed, unwelcome at every major firm in Tokyo once word spread of exactly what she'd done and exactly who she'd done it to. She watched from the outside, scrolling through headlines, as the very company she'd once ruled with cruelty and favoritism became the most successful, most respected technology firm in all of Asia, under the leadership of the woman she'd tried to destroy. One evening, months after everything had settled into a strange, hard-won peace, Maya sat across from Kaito in her office. Her office now, permanently, a nameplate on the door that read Maya Brooks, Chief Executive Officer. She looked up from her paperwork and caught him watching her with a small, quiet smile. So, she said, setting down her pen, a grin tugging at her lips, you really bought an entire company because someone made me cry. Kaito considered that for a moment, then shook his head slowly. No, he said, I bought it because they forgot how to respect my wife. Maya laughed, a real laugh, warm and unburdened, the first one that had felt truly free since that terrible day in the rain. Outside her office window, Tokyo's skyline glittered in the evening light, and for the first time in a long time, Maya Brooks felt like she was exactly where she belonged. If this story kept you hooked until the very last word, that's exactly the point. So if you haven't already, hit subscribe right now, drop a comment telling me what part hit you hardest, and smash that like button before you go.